Hello, you're listening to the Saluki Gamescast. This is episode 120 for Wednesday, August 27th, 2025. My name is Justin Young, and joining me, well, it's like I'm almost here alone, but luckily Mario Sanders is here to keep me company, or else it's going to be a really boring podcast if it's just me talking.
Justin talking about the news by yourself.
I mean, look, Jeff Gerstmann's podcast is just him most of the time. And it's very weird. It's like a descent into somebody's psyche in a way that I don't know that he even realized that's what it was going to be when he started that. And so I'm not sure if I'm comfortable with that. You're sort of laying your soul bare, I feel like, if you're trying to do a 2-hour podcast by yourself.
Yeah, that is a lot.
Particularly when you're doing it every week, right? Like,
sure.
It'd be one thing to do it as a one-off. But.
Yeah. I know there's one that I've listened to, and you know, she'll do like a little 5-minute, 7-minute, I think it's daily, but that's one where you can like really like go on a particular topic and then you're done. But 2 hours a week, that's a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, 5-7 minutes, you could be like, hey, I'm just going to fill you in on this story, right? Something that's happened and everything. And okay, that makes sense. But yeah, when you start getting into multiple hours, like that's a Herculean feat to keep up and to make it interesting, right?
Sure.
Like, I feel like lots of people can talk for 2 hours straight, but like to get people actually compelled to listen to it, that's a whole another thing. So,
and that's one of those things, you know, to where like, you can really tell the difference. I don't want to mean for this to sound mean or anything like that, but like those streamers that are like really good and really engaging with like their audience, and people like me who's mostly just sitting there playing a game, you know, not talking a ton, but like the people who are able to find the like small little, what feels like an insignificant detail and turn it into some big conversation. Is always, I think, an impressive thing that people can do.
Yeah, I mean, it's a skill, right?
Yeah.
I feel like it's one of those skills that sort of gets dismissed because, anybody can play video games. But the people who do it and are interesting while doing it do have a skill.
Absolutely.
You know, the same thing as YouTubers.
Sure.
Like, you know, yes, anybody can post videos, and a lot of it, I would say 99% of it is garbage. But, you know, that 1% or less than 1% who really make a living at it, there's something that they're doing. Generally, I would say most of them have some skill. There are some people who are garbage making a living. But, like, you know, the people who have been doing this for a very long time, I think I shared a video in the group chat. Jenny Nicholson went to the Pokemon World Championships. And, you know, Jenny Nicholson did a 4-hour video about the shuttered Star Wars hotel, the Galactic Star Cruiser at Disney World. And everybody who I read who watched that video said, 4 hours, this is like crazy self-indulgent. No human being can make this interesting for 4 hours. And, you know, she does a really good job of like just dissecting that in every which way you can imagine.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a reason, as far as I know, that's all she does professionally now is, you know, those sorts of video essays. Also, interesting fact, tying back to last week, her dad was apparently one of the developers of the first Bubsy game.
Oh, wow. Of all the games.
If you watch her videos, in the background, there's a stuffed Bubsy doll.
Oh, really? That's cool.
And so, yeah, that's really bizarre, but kind of fun.
I wonder what that, I mean, like, don't get me wrong, like there should be a lot of pride in doing that, but I would love to hear that conversation of like, oh yeah, I'm a game developer. Oh really? What did you make? Bubsy.
No, I mean, you know, I think that probably happens with a lot of people who work in media. Like,
oh, sure.
What movies have you been in? And it's like, you know, Garfield. I worked with a woman one time, and her sister was an actress.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was like really interested. I was like, "Oh wow, what has she been in? You know, what's her name? What has she been in?" And she was very cagey about like giving me her name. And then finally later, it kind of like came out that she had been in not pornographic films, but like I would say erotic films, like the sort of films that might air like late at night on Cinemax that aren't quite pornographic, but
they're leaving a little bit to the imagination.
I was like, okay, I get why maybe she didn't want to share that. So that was not the conversation I expected us to get into to start off this podcast. How's your week been?
Week's been pretty good. Yesterday I went with classmate to the DuQuoin State Fair. Really, it's the first I had never been before. Mm-hmm. So it was cool, you know, during a weekday, and it was fairly early in the day. But so, you know, it wasn't super busy, wasn't super crazy, but I don't know, it was nice to just be able to do a loop or two, see all the different vendors and the things that they're doing. So I'm glad to have had the chance to do that.
Did you eat?
I did. I got a corn dog, got a lemon shake up. So nothing
bizarre.
Yeah, nothing too crazy, but definitely some hit the spot fair food.
Yeah. I was there Saturday night. So David Lee Roth was playing.
I saw you post about that, and so I went with Frankie, and he was asking if you know either of us knew who was playing like the upcoming days. And I had said, oh, I saw Justin post about seeing David Lee Roth. I think that was here, but I didn't know for sure.
Yeah, I think he was their big headliner.
Mm-hmm.
And then they had Jake Owen was playing, who's apparently a country musician.
I did hear that name get brought up, yeah.
But apparently last Friday they had Sister Hazel was playing, and that was completely free, which kind of surprised me.
I'm not sure who that is.
Band really from the 90s.
Okay.
Like, I don't know how to tell you who they are.
That's fair. I can always look them
up. You would know one of their songs, I feel like.
Okay.
I feel like one of their songs you would have heard at some point.
That makes sense, yeah.
But yeah, David Lee Roth, I went to see. Those listening who maybe don't know, which is pretty much all my students, don't know who David Lee Roth is. David Lee Roth was the former frontman from Van Halen. So things like Panama, Running with the Devil, those sorts of songs, before he got replaced by Sammy Hagar. And yeah, so going to see him was really cool. You know, I think we talked about last week when I was telling you guys about going to see him was, can he still perform? And the answer is not entirely. Like his voice is gone in a lot of ways. But he still puts on a pretty good show.
Yeah.
He had a really good band playing with him. I would say the lead guitarist, you know, you're playing on Van Halen songs. You're having to sort of play in the shadow of Eddie Van Halen, which would be incredibly intimidating to just about anyone. But like that guy, you know, his performance sounded like you were listening to a Van Halen record.
That's impressive then, for sure. That's actually the first concert I went to was Van Halen.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. This would have been like maybe 2009 or something. They did a reunion tour or something with David Lee Roth.
Oh, okay.
And so that was the first concert that I went to, and it was a ton of fun. I didn't know their music a ton. I think it was my friend's parents had bought tickets, and so and they had an extra one, and so I mean it was a great time. But when I saw that, you know, I was interested to also hear like, I wonder how 17 years has treated him.
Well, I mean, I imagine he's in his early 70s at least.
Probably a safe bet.
And you know, like he looks it. He looks like an old man and everything. And but you know, like he's still up there performing. He still has that charisma. I know I sent a clip of it to a friend, and her reaction was, yeah, like, he's not the same singer, but like he still has something about him where you like watching him.
He's got the showmanship still.
Yeah. And I was like, that's a really big difference. Like the little local band you go see versus the big superstars. Like one of the things you notice, or I notice very quickly, is like, yeah, like these guys look and feel like rock stars on stage.
Yeah.
Like there's something, that charisma, that showmanship that they have, that X factor, the sort of thing that I guess you can probably teach to some degree, but not entirely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we think about it from like the performance studies side of it. Yes, you can be very good at playing music, but there is an additional layer to putting on a live show.
Absolutely.
And that is like so much easier said than done.
Yeah. I mean, we see that on the Klein now stage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and it goes back to what we were just talking about. Like, can you make a 4-hour video about a hotel, a shuttered hotel, interesting? And some people are able to do that because they can just pick and choose like the things that people are going to resonate with, and they can, communicate that in, intriguing ways. And
bring that special flavor that only they uniquely have.
Absolutely.
Right. That the voice. When I'm trying to explain voice to students, that's always the biggest thing. Like, what makes this sound like you versus everyone else?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's being able to tap into the fact that like everybody in this class could give this same speech. Everybody in this class could give this same performance. What are you doing with it, right? Because it is going to be uniquely yours when you do it, and it's being able to tap into that aspect.
Absolutely. All right, that does it for the academic side of this podcast. Maybe we're going to drop a little academic knowledge on you if you're listening, but why don't we move into what we've been playing? And Mario, what have you been playing?
Yeah, so I had talked about it. Well, actually, I didn't talk about it much last week, but I had played only a very little bit of Donkey Kong Bonanza when we met last week, so I didn't really feel like I could talk that much about it. I have beaten it, at least the like main story. I haven't done like 100% collecting all of the things. And
we don't have to reveal the post game content.
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know how much of that I will do, but I've at least beaten the main story, and and I think you're probably going to talk about that, so I'm happy to just have we can talk about it together.
Yeah, why don't we just talk about that now?
That's a good game. And I'm not surprised that it's a good game, but I think the thing that surprises me about it is, Nintendo always has, I feel like it has this reputation of being like the kids' games and obviously family friendly and stuff like that. That game does not really hold your hand. At least I didn't feel like it, like as compared to other games where, as we talked about last week, where you're just like, oh my God, just let me do my thing, please.
Right.
I feels like that game is just kind of like, yeah, do what you want. You'll find bananas eventually.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of the new direction within Nintendo. And it's sort of a return to the Nintendo of 8 and 16-bit era.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of less hand-holdy. I mean, obviously, Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild first. I think were really big pushes in that way.
Yeah.
We're moving away from where Zelda had gone to where, it's, hey, the first 2 hours of playing this is a tutorial.
Sure.
And very hand-holdy. And, I feel turned a lot of people off. Skyward Sword is the one that lots of people point to with that. But, and then they came along and they said, hey, this is going to be more like the original Legend of Zelda on the NES, and that here's just this big world and you have to figure your way around it.
Yeah. But I think Breath of the Wild does it really nicely in that it starts you on that plateau, but it is still just kind of like, go where you, like, we're going to contain you for a little bit of time, but it's still go wherever you want to go. And, you'll find people to talk to, and eventually you'll progress through, the tutorial. Like, we're hiding the tutorial aspects of it, right?
There's signposting you still.
Yeah.
But, in a way that you can say, well, hey, there's something over there. I just want to go look at that and completely ignore the signpost.
Yeah.
I feel like this game is doing that quite a bit, maybe even more so than Mario Odyssey did.
I would agree with that.
Mario Odyssey has that first opening sort of world, the sort of like ghost world that you're going through. And that's sort of very tutorialized. But, once you get into the first open area with the dinosaur, where that is, they kind of open up those levels and are like, here's the level.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Yeah. And I guess you could probably say the same thing about Bananza. You start on whatever, like all the minding monkeys level is. And so like, it's probably doing that a little bit, but that's not very long. Like that you get through that section. I mean, unless you're doing a ton of exploring, which you absolutely can. Like there's a lot of exploring to do, even in a very small little tutorial section. Sure. But then you
very quickly get into that first level.
Yeah.
That first real open world level.
Yep.
And there's still some signposting. Like there are characters that you can walk up and talk to and they'll say, hey, you should go over here. And it puts a little marker on the map. But, I think particularly what makes it feel that way maybe is because you can destroy everything in the environment. Yeah. It feels like you can very quickly go off on a tangent and get completely off that main track.
Yeah. And I think that the fact that you can destroy so much, and I didn't necessarily test it out. There are certain areas where it's expected of you, but like you can dig down pretty far, and there's like a lot of like subterranean areas that you can just like do some exploring of, and it makes you realize pretty fast, wow, this game is really big.
Yeah.
This is a massive game. I don't know if it was you who was saying it last week, but like this might be one of the biggest Nintendo games that I can think of that I've at least played through. I haven't actually played through Tears of the Kingdom, but I would think it's probably pretty close to that when you like add up all of the different worlds and all the things that you can do. This is a very big game.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's parceled out differently because there are sort of levels, right? You're kind of going into new levels that are open worlds. It's kind of that open zone concept of it's not a fully open contiguous world, but you are going to this level, and in that level is open world.
And I think that is
similar to Mario Odyssey.
I'd say, similar to Mario Odyssey, but I mean, the one that first came to mind was like how Super Mario 64 did it as well, right? Like you jump into the painting and these worlds are separate from one another, which I think I guess I appreciate that so much. I feel like a truly open world in many ways can be overwhelming. Right. And I think people tend to think of those like boundaries as being a bad thing or like constraining, but that constraining can be good. Like there's a reason we include those in the things that we do. And so like putting some amount of constraints and then just saying, okay, well, here's a brand new thing. And this place is going to have its constraints, but there's still so much exploring. It makes these very big worlds feel manageable in some ways.
Yeah. I mean, I think after Bowser's Fury, there was a lot of discussion, and we probably talked about it on this podcast. Is the next Mario game just a fully open world game, right? Where from the very beginning you can go and fight Bowser and win the game. And I don't know for a platformer if that's really the way to go.
Yeah.
When you look at something like this or Astro Bot, which also had very big levels, like a Mario Odyssey, same way. Certainly levels have gotten bigger than the Mario 64 days.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you feel like you're in an entire world, kind of in a mini open world with each level, right? Yeah. And I think this game does that very well. It sort of the way you transition from one level to another by jumping down a hole or taking the eels back up.
Yes.
Like I feel like they do a good job of making it feel maybe more connected than Mario Odyssey, where you're jumping on a spaceship and going to the next world.
Sure.
But like, I guess you're not going to another world. You're going to another part of the world. I'm getting confused with Mario Galaxy. But I feel like those sort of like being self-contained while still mini open worlds probably works better for a platformer. Like, I don't know if you took something the size of Breath of the Wild and turned that into a Mario game. Like, maybe I'm just not creative enough. It feels like there would be a whole lot of just running Mario around, and that's not really what I'm looking for from a Mario game.
Well, I think it ends up being really similar to the open world of Mario Kart World, which I really appreciated, but a lot of people kind of were meh about that, it seemed like.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, and we talked about that's one of the problems. Like, is there enough to do in between these areas?
Yeah.
Right. And I still, I may be proven wrong. I still feel like that was very purposefully done with the idea of being able to expand and build on that game over time.
I would think so.
Because I just don't feel like, why else would you do that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you've got a formula that has worked. It's almost always worked.
Right.
It's literally one of their best-selling game of at least your previous generation, your previous 2 generations.
Right.
And that would be a pretty massive risk to take for the very first game of your brand new console.
Well, I think it's that danger of, with new games, there's always this feeling, well, you've got to do something new.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And we hear this a lot. I'm guilty of saying it too. Like, oh, they've done this 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
They need to do something new. I feel that way about Zelda. They did Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Well, they need to do something new with this next one.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, like, do they need to do a radical departure? They did a radical departure 2 games ago. That's why we have Breath of the Wild.
Well, and I think the thing that helps Zelda is that you've got these like 2 concurrent games with the like Breath of the Wilds, and then you've got like the spiritual successor of the 2Ds with what Echoes of Wisdom was, because that's also a pretty radical departure as well, right?
Yeah.
And
or even just the Link's Awakening remake.
Yeah, absolutely. And so you know, like, I think that helps those games feel a little bit more fresh, but it is another one where it'll be interesting to see what they do, because I mean, that's where they added with Tears of the Kingdom was like the below world and the sky part as well. And so there's definitely, I agree with you that there's this pressure and this expectation that I think us as fans were kind of all guilty as placing upon these companies, but there is also something to be said of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, I think you're getting at the point with Donkey Kong Bonanza that you had sort of, in Donkey Kong 64, you had basically copied the Mario 64 formula.
Yeah.
Right. And expanded it with the collectathon sort of things, which, you know, was not a positive addition.
Maybe a little too far.
But I think the thing that struck me about this game, from the moment they introduced it, and you saw the destructible environments, but I don't think you really wrap your head around till you're actually playing the game. You have your hands on the controller and everything. This is not just Mario Odyssey. This is a significant departure.
Yeah.
From that gameplay. Yeah, like, there are things you can see that tie it together where you go, oh, this is the same developers. But it doesn't feel like just a Mario Odyssey.
No, this feels like its own fresh game. Absolutely.
Like its own franchise.
Sure.
Right? Like not a reskinning of the way I often felt Donkey Kong 64 felt like a reskinning of, if not Mario 64, then Banjo-Kazooie.
Sure.
You know, it was different, but it was different in the way that often I think the thing that's really cool to see about Nintendo do with this is they're the king of making these 3D platformers. And in recent years, they've made Mario Odyssey, they've made Kirby and the Forgotten Land, and they've made this Donkey Kong game. And those feel like distinctly different games in a world where Nintendo could be seen as like hitting, you know, Control C over and over again.
Yeah.
And they could get away with that, right? Like
Yeah.
you could make Mario Odyssey just with Donkey Kong and just with Kirby, and it would be a very good game and it would still sell well. But they actually make the effort to say, let's make this something different.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels like it has its own unique character to it. I mean, like, but beyond the obvious, but like Donkey Kong has some characterization. Pauline has this characterization that make them feel, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I don't feel like I'm playing a game that I've already played before.
And, like with Pauline, I think that's really neat. Here we take this character as like no personality, no, really established canon.
Yeah.
Historically. And with Mario Odyssey, she's the mayor of New Donk City, and there's that whole sequence of her singing as you're playing through with Jump Up Superstar. And that's fantastic. And you're like, that's cool. They gave Pauline something to do. She's never had anything to do. They gave her something to do. That's cool. It's sort of this, redemption story for this character. And then they get to this game and you're like, well, they just took it completely like 10 miles further than that.
Yeah, giving her like a real backstory and like this is who she is. And so, I think that's very, very good.
I mean, she feels like as established of a Nintendo character in that Mario sort of canon, as big as just about anybody, outside of Peach, maybe of the female characters, she's certainly as big and as well defined as Daisy
or Rosalina. Yeah, absolutely.
Man, that was not a very unexpected twist to see Pauline come back and become important in Nintendo. So sorry, we kind of got off track talking about several different things there, but you were saying that, just the like scale of the game has been impressive.
Yeah, like I said, it feels like a big game. I was surprised at how many different levels there were as well. It was one of those things where there might be like 4 or 5 levels more than I was expecting. I think I was expecting like, it's maybe going to have 8 to 10, especially with how big they were. And then for it to kind of just keep going, I was like, oh man, there's another one and there's another one. Right. I kept expecting the game's going to end soon. The game's going to end soon. And it was just, kind of there's another layer that you get to like explore. And so I think that there's, especially as it was getting to the end, because I was kind of trying to beat it before we recorded again. And so a few of those like final levels, I did very little exploring of. So there's still a lot that I have to go back to if and when I want to, which is exciting.
Yeah. And that way, I think that's very similar to what they did with Mario Odyssey, where I feel like Mario Odyssey, you feel like the game is ending about 3 levels before it ends. Because at least me personally, like I felt like that game was ending before I ever got to the moon.
Sure. It's been so long, but I could definitely see that. Yeah, that's probably the case.
And you get that whole moon sequence, which, there's even more to that than you are anticipating at first. And you're like, okay, this is cool. This is like, this doesn't feel like grudging work I have to do.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't feel like you're padding the game out. It feels like you're rewarding me.
Yeah.
With this additional content.
Yeah. I think the only reason why it felt like that for me was because I was like, okay, I got to try and get through this. But like, and so that's my own fault. But
any game you can do that if you're trying to beat it under a deadline.
Yeah. But I think that and I think the one thing that I kind of kept thinking about, so you get all of these different Bananzas, right? I think you get 5 of them. And I think that was the thing is you get the third one. I think you get the third one and I'm like, okay, the game's gotta end sometime soon, but there's 2 that are still completely blank. I was like, I don't know what else is going to happen here. And so, that was one of those like sort of the first keying in of like, there's got to be a pretty decent chunk more that's still going to happen here. So
I think one of the things that Nintendo has gotten very good at, and I mean, they've always been good at this to one extent or another. Like, you go back and play Super Mario World, is they introduce a new gameplay concept, but it's not a one-off. Like, they take that concept and they sort of twist it and tweak it so that you're not just doing one thing with this, you're doing 5 or 6 different things with it. So I think of like the cape in Super Mario World. And of course the obvious thing is, oh, Mario can fly. And when you first do that, you're like, oh, it's like the raccoon tail in Mario 3. But it's actually much more complicated than that, because not only can you fly up, but then now you can control your flight and you can like dive bomb and go back up. And then you start thinking, okay, well, this is also a weapon. Well, it was that in part 3, but like there's also all these other things of being able to run up walls and things using it. And I think that's the thing that they did in Mario Odyssey when you first start playing it. You're like, okay, well, this seems like a cool concept. I can throw my hat and capture these enemies. But then they start tweaking all the different ways that you might utilize that and all the different things that you can take control of that you're not expecting at the beginning of the game.
And then getting to see how when there's an enemy in a particular level, to see that enemy then again in a new level, and you're like, oh, now I get to use this enemy in this context.
Right.
And I think that game, that's one of the things that makes that game so good.
Yeah.
And I think very replayable.
Right.
And I think that I could see Bananza being really the same way.
Yeah. And I mean, that was why I was talking about that. Was like, yeah, that was my reaction when I started playing Bananza, was like, okay, for a lot of games, for a lot of platformers that are not made by Nintendo, they would come up with, okay, we're going to have destructible environments. And that's it, right? We're not going to explore this concept any. We're just going to have this one ability that we're giving you new for this new game.
Yeah.
And, very quickly they start going, okay, well, yeah, you can bash through anything, but then here's this material that you can tear off and it becomes bombs that you can throw. And then it starts sort of like tweaking how you can build that upon itself.
Yeah. I really appreciated how the different kinds of terrain could be used differently. Like the soft terrain, there's one banana in one of the levels where you've got to throw the snow or the mud at a pillar to create almost like a staircase to get to the top of it, because you can't just climb it. It's too slick or something.
Right.
So stuff like that is just that extra level of consideration that makes it more than just a destructible environment, but something that you are meaningfully interacting with.
Yeah, I think the game I always think of most when I think of destructible environments is Red Faction.
Okay.
And from the very beginning, Red Faction had that was their the Geo mod system is what they called it. But the original Red Faction is just a first-person shooter. You're just going through levels and shooting stuff, and you can I can blow a hole in this wall here, and it's cool. That's neat to do. But it was Red Faction Guerrilla, which was the sort of open world where you're on Mars, and you just have a giant map that you're going through. And it really started to seem like in that game they figured out the more sort of ways we give people to play with this technology, the happier people are going to be with it, because then the whole game becomes this sort of sandbox.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, yeah, I can blow up that building, but what is going to be the most fun way or the coolest way for me to do that? And I think this game rewards you with that sort of fun in that, okay, here's this item I want to get to. What is going to be the way I choose to get to, which may be entirely different than the way that you choose to get to.
Yeah. Well, and I think that seemed to be such the ethos of Breath of the Wild with the shrines, right? They always talked about it as there's no wrong way to get to the end of the shrine. Just there's no wrong way to get a banana.
Yeah.
It might be different, but if you got it, you got it. And I think that's so appreciated that Nintendo has really seemingly leaned into that, what feels like a design philosophy.
One of the things I talk about why I love Mario Odyssey so much is there are segments in Mario Odyssey where there will be like a wall, and then there's a top of the wall. And you like look at it and you go, okay, well, like, you know, you're very clearly being signposted to go ignore this stupid wall. It's just decoration there for you, right? Just go to the end of the level. But being players, people like start playing around with it, and they're like, can I get up on top of that wall? Can, you know, I'm not supposed to be there, but can I get up there? And you get up there and there's coins up there.
Yeah.
And so, like, you don't need coins. Coins are pointless in that game. They don't mean anything. In the same way that sort of the gold in this game is sort of, you know, superfluous. But, like, somebody at Nintendo designing those levels was like, somebody's going to try to get up here, and we're going to reward them, you know, with not a game-changing, like, Easter egg or, you know, sort of power-up or anything of that nature. But we're just going to reward them to say, we know you did this.
Yeah.
Congratulations. And I feel like this game has that sort of, you know, again, it's the same developers, has that same sensibility to it of, we know you're going to screw around with this world and we're going to reward you. And I feel like, you know, you talking about the shrines, absolutely. In Zelda, that was that same sort of mindset of, we could lock this down and make you beat this the way we want you to.
Yeah.
But we're going to open up and say, hey, if you can do it, you can, you know. And they even went a step further with Tears of the Kingdom with that, with like, you know, the construction.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Where you're like, I know I was talking to a friend recently about that, and she was like, I feel like I didn't fully embrace that game because I didn't build like a giant mech or something to go storming through it. And I'm like, yeah, but like, that's Nintendo saying you can do that, but you don't have to do that. You can just do the bare minimum.
Yeah, right, because I feel like there are so many games that we can all probably think of one that has something that you can do, but it forces you to do that thing, right? It forces you to, you have to play through this section. And when it gets to that section, I'm like, oh God, here's another thing. I have to do this part of the game. When it's like, if I could choose to not, if I could just run through it as my character, but instead you have to put me into this thing. And I appreciate that Nintendo has been like, nah, we'll let you do it if you want to, but you don't have to do that thing.
Yeah. Or you can do it your way. Or, you know, you can build a bridge across this. So instead of having to do the platforming, you can just create your own bridge and walk across it. It's very cool. I mean, it's almost a sort of Minecraft sort of mindset to a game.
Sure.
Of, hey, this is more of a sandbox. This is more of a box of Legos. Like, you don't have to build the castle the way it's shown on the box.
Yeah.
You can kind of innovate. And, you know, Nintendo's always had that sort of creativity at the center of their games. I feel like at different times they've moved more and further away from it, like closer and further away from it. And over the last console generation with the Switch and now into the Switch 2, it seems like that's really the sort of ethos of the company more than it has been, you know, in the decade prior.
Yeah. And it's maybe the antithesis of what we're saying. But I think this is also just who I tend to be and how I interact with games. It makes me really excited to watch some speed runs of it.
Oh yeah.
Because there's like, oh, that's the most efficient way that you could get through this. Right. I know there's one streamer I watched. I specifically avoided watching it, but he did, I think however many, they're all 600 bananas or something like that. He did it in like 4 hours. And I'm just like, all right, at some point, once I'm done with the main story, I'm going to watch this because that seems incredible to be able to have routed this out in such a way to get all of that in that short of amount of time.
Yeah. I I think one of the things they do really well in this game is you mentioned Paulina and like the changes with her, but I think also the changes to Donkey Kong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I know that was really controversial, the redesign of Donkey Kong. But I think particularly we saw a bit of this in Mario Kart World, but particularly in this game, you see why that redesign was done.
Sure.
Like he is much more of a Pixar character in this game, right? Like he's not talking. He's, you know, doing his and like his little sounds and everything, but like he's having to communicate with his face.
Yes.
And that redesign really allows it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's cool. Like, you know, I don't want a deep story in my Donkey Kong game, but having, you know, Donkey Kong is the game that popularized storytelling in arcade games with the little interstitials between the levels. And so when you start seeing something like this, you're like, yeah, there's not a deep story here, but you've given these characters personality where I care about them in a way.
Yep.
You know, I think that's one of the problems sometimes with platformers is like, how much do I actually like or care about this character?
Sure.
You know, you think back to the 16-bit days. Think about Bubsy. Speaking of Bubsy, let's go back to talk about Bubsy. You know, Bubsy's entire, like, sort of getting you to like him is, you know, his little quips that he makes constantly. And how quickly that got tiring of so many of those 16-bit mascot games.
I know that was one of the jokes when we were playing at least the 64 Gex games. Just like, oh, please stop talking, man.
Well, the last new Bubsy game that they made a few years ago, they made a 2D new game, and it actually has a verbosity slider in the options, so you can make Bubsy talk less. He still talks. He just talks less. So it's like, I guess if you're on the verge of like suicide and you're like, he's got to talk a little less, just a little. I can handle this if he just shuts up occasionally. And it's like insane, you know, for them to include something like that. But it's also really funny.
But also they're recognizing there's got to be at least one Bubsy fan out there that's going to turn this thing up, right?
Right. There's one masochist who just wants as much Bubsy as possible.
That's the YouTube challenge run. Just play the game normally, but Bubsy's got to the talk meter's got to be turned all the way up.
And I feel like you know, to come away from this game and not be annoyed at these two characters.
Yeah.
You know, it very quickly could have descended into that.
Sure.
And instead, I already like these two characters, but to come away from it going, oh, like, this makes me appreciate the redesign of Donkey Kong. This makes me appreciate that backstory that you're giving Pauline, these other characters.
Yeah, it's one where, like, I will be excited whenever they make the sequel.
Right.
You know, I mean, like, one, because they've got to give Donkey his coconut gun back, but two, just because I will be excited to see more of these characters.
Yeah. I don't know about you. For me, this feels like the system seller for the Switch 2.
Yeah.
More than Mario Kart World. But that's me. I feel like I don't play as much Mario Kart period as other people. Like when my students, when we were doing Playing for Pets, the students were all like, oh, well, we have to play this map and this map. And like they knew them, like not looking at the screen, they like knew them in their head. Name. Right? And like I do not have that level of knowledge of the 50 tracks I have.
I'm there with you. I mean, I think we talked about that when all of it got announced. I'm not a big Mario Kart person.
Right.
I got it because the bundle just made more sense. But it was Donkey Kong. It was this game that was like, that's the one that makes me want to get it a system sooner rather than later.
Yeah, it was from that first reveal of this game when they showed the like sort of depth of the game and everything, where I was like, okay, this is more than I was expecting from a 3D Donkey Kong.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a really good game. I think if you are buying a Switch 2, it's obviously different audiences that come into it and everything, but like this is the game I would say, hey, if you want to see why the Switch 2 is something bigger and better than the original Switch, this is the game that sells that. And I feel like it's sort of a must buy for most audiences.
Yeah, who knows where it will rank among sort of the games when the Switch 2 is at the end of its lifetime, but I imagine it will be pretty high on that list. Like if somebody is telling me, actually somebody did recently tell me that they just got a Switch 2 and it's going to be, at least at this point, the first game I recommend somebody get. Yeah.
I mean, I think it would depend on the audience, right?
Sure.
There are some people I'd say, oh, get Mario Kart. But yeah, this is the game. This is the game I would tell people. This is the reason to bother owning a Switch. I think we all said when we did the episode when we all got our Switch 2s, maybe don't rush out and buy one of these.
Yeah, unless you're a massive Mario Kart fan. Right. But now it feels like, okay, there's something that, and I guess I also feel a little validated in like being so excited for this and saying like mentally, like this is the game that I'm anticipating most. This is the one that's really going to make me want to get the system. For it to hit it out of the park, feels good.
Yeah, and to really justify that that purchase. I think one of the things I would just add is when we talked about Tears of the Kingdom, one of the things that we talked about was, the what is it called? Is it called God Hand in that game? The ability to build.
I don't know.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called now. I know it's a reference to like an old toy that they made in the 70s before Nintendo got into video games. But anyways, that one of the things that was really kind of amazing about Tears of the Kingdom was not that they added these systems, but like how like well those systems worked in the game, like how like natural they felt. And if those systems had appeared in a different developer's game, those systems would have been sort of janky. And I feel like I kind of touched on this last week in talking about the game, but like you create an environment where people can destroy the entire environment. And I feel like in a lot of games that would come off incredibly janky. It
would feel like you're breaking the game.
Right.
Whereas it doesn't feel that way.
Right. And I feel like that's the big achievement of this game. That's the sort of thing.
That's a good point.
As somebody who has made a couple of video games, but would not consider myself a game developer in any way, when I look at this and it's always that thing of as a critic, right? When I'm critiquing movies or something, it's real easy to say this movie's garbage, but I'm not the one out there making the movie.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to criticize video games, but I'm not the one out there making it. So I always try to be understanding of the little knowledge I do have, the little experience I do have of like how difficult this would be to pull off.
Sure.
And, appreciate that when I see something done exceptionally well in a game. And I look at this and I go, man, like the fact that they make this work in a game that I feel like I could give to, my niece, my youngest niece who's in elementary school, is kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And it's sort of that Nintendo difference. It's that Nintendo magic.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I think that's one of those things about this game is, I, as I said at the beginning, that it kind of is just like drops you in and, go wherever you want, do whatever you want to do. When you compare that to a lot of those earlier games, the 8-bit and the 16-bit, those games were oftentimes a little inscrutable in terms of like figuring them out because it didn't do the signposting. For a game to be as open as it is, but to feel simple in a good way that you could give to a kid and they would probably have as much fun with it as anybody else, I think is also a real achievement.
Yeah, I mean,
it's not overly complicated or like, inscrutable in terms of figuring out like, well, I don't know where the hell am I supposed to go, and so what am I supposed to do here?
Bubsy 3D, a fantastic example, right? Of somebody making, and in their defense, right? They're one of the first games to come out and try to be a 3D platformer, but like how terrible the controls in that are, how terrible the level design is. That's just a game broken in just about every imaginable way. And you compare that to a game like this that is doing something very similar, but does not feel broken in any way. And that was part of why I was so high on Astrobot, because we get so few of those games, particularly in the platformer genre these days.
Yeah, especially from PlayStation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, outside of Nintendo, right? Like we kind of expect Nintendo to nail it every time, but anybody else, we just don't see it that often. And when they do, it's sort of impressive. All right. Anything else you want to say about Donkey Kong?
No, I think that's about it.
I guess I ask you, it sounds like this is probably going to be on your Game of the Year list.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'd have to play some absolute bangers for the final 3 months of the year for this to not be, I know I do more of the N64 list, but for like a personal list, it's hard to imagine this won't be on it.
Yeah, I think this is going to be very much in that discussion, probably in more than one category.
Yeah. Yes, when we do our Game of the Year at the end of the year, I anticipate advocating for this for a pretty high spot.
Yeah. All right, cool. Why don't we move on over into news? And it feels like a lot of news is, hey, this is coming in September. Get ready. September is going to be an important month, which is, like not always the case for the game industry. All right, to start off, Acclaim, we mentioned, I think back in the spring before we went on hiatus, that Acclaim is coming back. So it's back from the dead, which is always kind of a funny thought with it. They're holding their first showcase on September 10th. I thought that date was very funny. Like, we cannot hold our showcase on September 11th. That will look very bad.
Yeah.
But they're going to hold a showcase on September 10th to relaunch the brand after 20 years. They said they are really looking to the sort of history of Acclaim. For those who don't know offhand, Acclaim was very, very famous for their licensed games, like making a lot of games based off of movies, different things of that nature. They made baseball games. They published the Mortal Kombat games at one point. They published the wrestling games at one point. So they were very much in whatever license we can get, we'll build a game around it. I'm not entirely sure what this looks like, but they said they're sort of mining the archives, of Acclaim's history. They do have rights to those IP as part of this purchase of the name. So that'll be very interesting to see. Acclaim was not necessarily known for super high quality games always. But, one of the things we sometimes talk about is that sort of second tier of game doesn't exist as much anymore.
Sure.
Everything's super AAA, super high budget.
It's either as indie as it gets, or the like AAA, nearly quadruple A type of title.
Right. I mean, you are making Celeste, or you're making a $200 million, Spider-Man game, and there's not that whole lot in between. That's similar to the film industry has gone through that as well. I feel like if you're bringing the Acclaim name back, much in the way of bringing the THQ name back, that is what they were known for. They were known for that sort of second tier of game.
Yeah.
And THQ seems to be doing a good job of trying to target that. So that is September 10th. Then Electronic Arts announced that Skate, which was at one point called Skate 4, now it's just called Skate, is going to enter early access on September 16th for all systems minus the Switch and Switch 2. So there's not currently a version for those systems, not at least in early access. but PlayStation 4, 5, Xbox One, Xbox S and X, and PC. This is their new Skate Games as a Service, where they're going to have, they have announced there's going to be different seasons. The soundtrack of the game will change from season to season. It is sort of an online game where you will log in and kind of just hang out and skate with your friends. It's not going to be, objective based in the way that the Tony Hawk games are known for.
That seems like a good, I don't know how to say this, a good style of game for those games as a service. I feel like that's kind of missing sometimes from a lot of those games. Like, what if your games as a service was kind of just a space to hang out?
Right.
And I think that this hopefully could be a good one that fits that.
And I think it makes sense for a skateboarding game because that's what skateboarding.
So much of it is.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
I mean, I was never big into skateboarding, but the people I knew who did, they'd go to some area and they would hang out and people would do different tricks.
Yeah.
Right. Certainly in college, I remember people
Sure.
like in different parts of campus, like here's 4 guys just doing different tricks for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what they're trying to capture with this. I don't know how much of a desire there is for that.
I think that's a fair point.
I think there's a desire for hangout games,
Yeah.
right? Games that you play and just kind of chat. That's how I play a lot of online games. I get on with a friend and we're in voice chat and a private voice chat, just talking to each other while we play.
Yeah.
And so like maybe this becomes the sort of game where there's less of that pressure, right? We're not playing Halo while doing that. And
it's even more casual than that. Yeah.
Right.
My character is sitting on the bench and your character is also sitting on the bench and we're just talking.
right. I mean, it's basically VR chat at that point.
Kind of.
So yeah, I'll be interested. I think the thing that will be interesting with this is how they monetize the game, right? Like, okay, you're going to sell like different skateboard decks. You're going to sell different clothing.
Yeah. I mean, I think about that, like skateboard culture, like the shoes and the clothes could be so much a part of it. So I could definitely see that being, especially if they get licensed with vans or stuff like that. Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see, do they go the Fortnite route or are we going to get Rihanna and skateboard as her in this game? I mean, that would make sense to some extent. I don't know if that turns off your like diehard skateboarding audience in doing that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, I mean, like, I'm sure you can figure out, different ways to do like tournaments and stuff as well, whether those be like live tournaments or like asynchronous tournaments, over the course of a period of time. So, it feels like there's a lot that they could do with this. So I think that that's exciting. I don't think I've ever really played any of the skate games, even like going back to the earlier ones. Those ones tended to be more like, I don't want to call them sim-like, but the like doing the tricks were, there was a lot more precision to them. Is that correct?
Right. I would say that the Tony Hawk games are much more arcadey.
Okay. Yeah.
And that the skate games were much more focused on, not just hitting this combo of buttons to do a kick flip, but actually the difficulty of landing a kick flip.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I remember playing, I forget if it was 1 or 2. I played a small amount. I won't say a huge amount of it, and liking it, but also sort of thinking like I kind of like the whole Tony Hawk style better. I just never got into skate as much as Tony Hawk, but I can completely see why people would.
Sure, absolutely. And I September 16th. Yeah, I mean, like I'll at least check it out, whether I play it, but I'll find other people who are playing it and watch a little bit of it at least.
Well, it'll be, my understanding is coming free, so.
Well, if that's the case, then I'll, probably even more likely to check it out.
Right. Let's see. Digital Foundry, as part of their podcast, reported that multiple developers still cannot get Switch 2 dev kits. And in some cases, Nintendo's response to them was, hey, just release it on the Switch 1. Which, this seems like such a weird story. We kind of, back in the spring, we're hearing stories that, hey, Nintendo might roll out games in sort of like a tiered system. Like, in the first few months of release of the Switch 2, they would only release a few games and hold some games back. I think this is what that was kind of alluding to, and that they were holding back dev kits from a lot of these developers. And so, at first, I think people assumed when there were murmurs of this going on that, okay, well, they're doing this, like maybe holding back dev kits from Microsoft, right? Because you don't want to give your competition your system before release. Or they were doing this to maybe some indie developers because you don't care as much about indie developers. You want to get the big AAA games out there. But, it seems like there's no sort of rhyme or reason. Some indie developers have gotten dev kits while some big AAA publishers cannot get dev kits.
Yeah.
And it seems like a really weird move by Nintendo.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. And, hopefully something that doesn't continue for long. I don't know. The response of just release it on the Switch 1 instead kind of feels like a joke. Like,
right.
Come on, Nintendo. You know that those are not the same system.
Well, I have not played it on the Switch myself, but I know somebody I was reading was talking about Ninja Gaiden Ragebound apparently runs at 30 frames per second on the Switch 1 port. And there is no Switch 2 version, whereas everywhere else it runs at 60 frames a second.
Yeah.
And, their kind of comment was, I would recommend people not get this game if you have a Switch 2, because there's no reason it shouldn't be running at 60 frames a second on the Switch 2.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
Right? And that seems weird to be intentionally sort of cutting off some of these developers at the knee.
Yeah.
Right? Who are already your developers.
And yourself in many ways, right? Like, if I'm Nintendo seeing that of just like okay, here's this game, people are not going to, like, you're seeing people specifically telling others, hey, if you're going to get this game, buy it on some other system. Right? Like, I would also be like, wait, no, don't do that.
Right.
So it's like, I understand that you probably still want to have things that are playable on the Switch 1 because you have such a big player base for that system. But
those games that can still be played on Switch 1, particularly indie titles, I feel like are still going to be made to run on the Switch 1, maybe with some improvements on Switch 2, but there's such a huge market. There's 140 million Switch 1s out there. Like, you'd be kind of crazy not to release that game where it works on both systems.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would think that from the developer side, it said like, well, if we've got the dev kits for both, we'll make sure it works on the Switch 1, but if we can release a Switch 2 version, we're going to do that too.
Right.
It goes back to the conversation we've had so much of, we want this as many places as possible.
Yeah. It seems like very weird behavior. I've, heard some different speculation about why they might be doing this. A lot of it is people kind of going, I don't know, this is like the craziest reason I can think of, because like nothing else makes sense. One of the reasons was maybe holding back dev kits to try to hold back piracy. Like, the moment you start getting those dev kits out there, those fall into the hands of people who, might want to like start hacking the system, and they want to delay that piracy as long as possible. They know it's going to happen eventually.
Sure.
But the longer they can delay it, the better for themselves.
Yeah.
But I could see that more with like the indie developers. It's a little weird doing that with AAA publishers.
Sure.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say.
Nobody does. Nintendo's a weird company.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest reason, right? It's Nintendo. Nintendo's going to do what Nintendo does.
I feel like that's just the answer for so much of what Nintendo does. Like, I don't know, it's Nintendo. They do not play by normal logic. Let's see. Speaking of Nintendo, this is probably the most logical thing they've done recently. They are going to, as usual, have a Direct in September. That's the big rumor. The rumor is for September 12th for that Nintendo Direct. Obviously,
they don't want to compete with Acclaim.
Right. Yeah. I think maybe Acclaim knows something in scheduling their date. If you're Acclaim, you definitely do not want to announce your things the same day Nintendo does. You will get shattered in news coverage. Yeah. So, I mean, look, they still have that. They have that that Pokemon game coming out. They have obviously, done a separate Pokemon Direct with more information on that. I would not be shocked if we hear something more about that Pokemon game as part of this.
Sure. I want to say that's sometime in October.
Yeah, I think that's right. Metroid Prime 4, we still do not have a release date for. That was recently rated by the ESRB. Usually when a game gets rated by the ESRB, about 1 to 2 months for that to come out.
Yeah, I have to imagine they want that out by the holiday.
Well, they have announced it's coming in 2025.
Oh, okay.
So
then almost assuredly.
Yeah. They have that Hyrule Warriors game.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Coming out still. So, they have some things still to date that don't, the Pokemon game has a date in October, but some of these other games that they've announced for this year do not. So we could get dates for those games. This might also be a time for them to start, teasing what will come in the spring.
Did the new Air Riders game, did that get a date last week with the thing that they did? I don't remember if we talked about it or not.
Yes, I think it did get a date.
Okay.
Yes.
I thought that was like 2026 to begin with, but I don't even remember.
That is coming this year.
Okay. All right. Sorry to not remember.
No, that's
but
it's very hard to keep all the release dates straight, especially when so many of the release dates keep changing.
Yeah. Well, that on top of it, but I remember, I feel like it feels like they do like one first party thing a month. And so if you figure, you've got Metroid, you've got Pokemon, you've got that game. I figure, that kind of takes them to the end of the year, just about.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think Nintendo very smartly puts out, about one first-party game a month. That allows them to not completely cannibalize their third parties.
Or themselves, right? Yeah.
And, keeps a steady, one thing that Nintendo has been very successful at that Microsoft and Sony have failed at is a steady cadence of games. Some of them are sort of the big AAA games like Donkey Kong, but then they'll put out something small in between there.
Yep.
Right. And, the story about Nintendo is they have several games completed that are just sitting on shelves, sometimes for a year or more, just sitting on a shelf for them to find an empty release date to slot it into. So I think we might get some of those in the spring.
Yeah, maybe.
Let's see. The National Diet Library in Japan, which is sort of their equivalent of the Library of Congress in the U.S., has announced that they will not accept Switch 2 game key cards. So much like the Library of Congress, when you publish a game in Japan, you are supposed to send a copy of it to this library because they want to have a copy of everything that gets published. And so they have started doing that with video games. I think in the early 2000s, they started doing this with video games. And they have said, we're not going to accept game key card games. So these are the ones where essentially the game is not fully on the card in the box. Instead, it's more of a code that authenticates that you can play the game. So you're having to download the game from servers. There's been a lot of backlash from Nintendo fans about game key cards, how many games are shipping on that format and not the full game. Certainly if you're a preservationist, if you're a collector, that's pretty frustrating. And obviously a library like this, their purpose is preservation largely. And so they're saying, hey, we don't consider this a valid format for preservation.
Yeah, it kind of defeats the purpose in many ways.
Right. Because if those servers ever go down, you can't then validate that. And there's nothing on the card itself. You can't just load it up and play it. Or there's very little, maybe not nothing. I thought this is interesting, just from a preservation standpoint.
Absolutely.
It's always interesting to think about, where are these companies 20 years from now? And, it's hard to imagine Nintendo being out of the video game industry 20 years from now. But, weird things happen.
Sure.
20 years ago is, a little longer than that. 30 years ago, it was difficult to imagine Sega not being in the game industry anymore.
Or at least not in the hardware business, right?
In the hardware business, right. And we're seeing right now, Microsoft, like, where is Xbox in 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, you want to go back probably a little less than 20 years. I mean, the 360 was probably the biggest. I think it was the biggest of that generation in terms of sales.
I think the PlayStation 3 outsold it by the end, but it dominated most of the generation.
Yeah, and for Xbox to be as, I don't know, almost like hobbling at this point, hardware-wise, is kind of hard to believe. If you were to go back to high school, me, and say that, or like to my friends, they'd think, no way, that's impossible.
Right.
Felt like everybody had a Xbox 360.
And we're only 2 generations removed from that, right? Like, all of that happened in the Xbox One generation, really.
Yeah. Which is also weird to think, but yeah, that is accurate.
I mean, part of it is console generations just last so much longer now. Like, it kind of messes with your head. I'm still in the mindset of console generations are 5 years, not 7, 8, or more years. This is interesting. I feel like this has become enough of an issue that Nintendo will need to address it in some way, less for this library, but more for consumers.
Sure.
And this just kind of adds more fuel to that fire. Let's see. Ilphonic, this is part of Gamescom. So after opening night live and after our last podcast, Ilphonic announced a new Halloween game in the style of the last Friday the 13th game. So they are the developers who made that last Friday the 13th, the asymmetrical online game. But I guess the really big news out of this is that's really cool to do a Halloween game in that style, since they can't do a Friday the 13th game because of all the complications with that license. But they are going to make a single player mode for this game. And so you could play Friday the 13th single player, but it was basically you playing with bots. This sounds much more like there's going to be a sort of, a sort of like handcrafted single player experience, I guess is the way to say it.
Yep.
So that's really cool. I know Christina was really excited that they're making a Halloween game.
I'll be interested to see if, assuming it's the same as the, that asynchronous style, if in the single player mode, if you are playing as a, I don't know, I guess Survivor or as Michael Myers.
Right. When I would play Friday the 13th as a single player game, I was always playing it as Jason, right? Like that was the fun part. To hunt down the kids and everything. I don't know what that says about me personally. But yeah, I mean, am I playing a teenager? Am I playing a babysitter trying to escape Michael, or do I get to play Michael stalking the teenagers? Maybe there will be 2 different campaigns for the single player.
It'd be interesting.
Let's see. Speaking of Christina,
another Christina news.
Right. I just grouped these all together, even though she's not here this week. They announced the Division 2 Survivors. So that is coming out next year in 2026. This is described as a survival extraction shooter. So this is kind of interesting in that the Division was working on a new game that was supposed to come out last year. That game was Homefront. I always get the title.
No idea. I've never played any of them, so.
Okay, well, it was something along those lines. Homeland, Homefront, something of that nature. And that game actually got into beta testing, and then it got scrapped. We've talked about it a little on here before. And so the rumor is that this game might be taking some of the work that was done on that game and turning it into an extraction shooter. Probably not the assets of the game as much as some of the tech that was being developed in that game.
Which, I mean, makes sense, certainly.
Yeah.
And, for those developers and the people that worked on that, be nice to see if their work is still actually being used for something.
Well, it's always the thing, when you hear about a project that gets canceled, you kind of hope, well, maybe people won't lose their jobs. Maybe they can just take some of what they worked on and redirect that into a new project. Mm-hmm. And that sounds like maybe that's what's going on here to some degree. We'll see. It's been a long time since the Division 2 came out. And so I feel like if they want to keep that franchise up, they got to do something with it.
Yeah.
Let's see. Hollow Knight Silksong, we talked about last week. It was that opening night live where they were like, hey, we're going to have another announcement later this week.
Announcing an announcement.
Right, which is weird for a game that's been in development this long. But anyways, they did have their announcement, and they announced a release date. That release date is September 4th, which I guess is next week.
Yeah, I loved all of the... So I almost sent something in our group chat, and I was thinking about Alicia because it was about like the fan community response to all of it and just like all of the memes that got made that were about it. And I think it was you familiar, this is probably not good podcast material, but are you familiar with the meme format? It's Anakin and Padme, and he's telling her a thing, and she's like, "You mean this, right?" And the look on his face. Right. And so it was that, and it comes out September 4th, and it was in 2025, right? And it was the look on his face, and then her concern in 2025, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that was the big thing. That was the meme that got spread around a ton. Was just like they never gave a year. They gave a date, but they did not give you the year. And so maybe it's next week.
I feel like I've been seeing very similar things with the Analog 3D, which is Analog's N64 system that they're putting out, and that has been delayed multiple times.
Gotcha.
And most recently, apparently related to tariffs.
Sure.
And that, they put out a statement like, hey, we're going to, we plan to release this in, the next 3 months. And people are like, next 3 months, like, you mean this year, right? The next 3 months of this year. And because it just feels, I haven't been following it in detail, but it feels like every few weeks I see some post about this has been delayed again.
Pushed back, yeah.
Yeah, and like I get the frustration, especially that because people, I think, pre-ordered, so
I'm sure
put some money towards it already. Which some people have with this game as well. Some people, they did a Kickstarter, I believe, at some point, and people backed this game. So, some people have been waiting a very long time to get their hands on this.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's cool. I wish I was excited. I keep thinking I should go back and play the original Hollow Knight and try to get into that game. Because I feel like when people really get into it, they really, really get into it. And but I think we talked about, we've had a very similar experience of, we tried this and it just didn't grab us.
Yeah, I feel like for me, and I kind of feel the same way of, I should go back and play it again. Like maybe I didn't give it enough time, which may be the case. I don't think I played it for all that long, but it feels like I must be missing something. This must be my fault.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
Because of how much people love this. And so I'm not going to do it before September 4th, that's for sure. But, you know, I'd like to go back at some point. And so maybe sometime in the future, I'll talk about Hollow Knight. But I have a lot of friends who really love Hollow Knight, so I'm happy for them.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, I'm just happy so I can stop hearing about this game. Right? Like, just take it off of every time we have a new, you know, Nintendo Direct or Xbox event that we're not going to have people going, is Silksong going to get talked about here? Yeah. I don't know what the new one of those is. Guess we'll find out. We have talked about the Mortal Kombat Legacy Collection previously, but they announced recently some additional games that are being added to this. So this is the sort of collection of classic Mortal Kombat games. So Mortal Kombat 1, 2, and 3, and Ultimate Mortal Kombat, but also like multiple different versions. So like the arcade version of Mortal Kombat 1, but also the Super Nintendo and Genesis versions, but also the Game Boy version, you know, all getting included as part of this. This is from Digital Eclipse, who's done all the like great preservation of old games and everything. So they announced that they were adding some additional games to this collection, which are Mortal Kombat Mythology Sub-Zero, which if you have never played is
a classic.
Yeah. It is trying
Maybe not
to
for
take
the best reasons, but it's a classic.
Well, this is, you know, the Mortal Kombat Mythology's name was like their attempt. Remember when they made that, what is it called? X-Men Origins Wolverine?
The movie?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So that was when they announced that, it was like, hey, we're going to start making individual movies about the different X-Men. So there was like a Magneto film that was in development at the same time that they made that film. And then, of course, that film came out and is atrociously bad. And so they just like scrapped all the other spinoffs they were planning with it. So this was the same thing that Mortal Kombat was trying to do with the mythologies. There was supposed to be like a Scorpion game that was going to follow up, and they would make games about all the different characters. And then that first one came out, and it is an atrociously bad side scroller platformer. Like, it's not just a side scroller beat 'em up, which would sort of make sense, but there's a whole lot of platforming.
A ton of platforming and like precision platforming.
And it's terrible.
Yeah.
Like, the platforming is terrible. Like, maybe if you took all the platforming out, that would be an okay game. Yeah. But, you know, it's sort of the controls of Mortal Kombat mixed in with platforming. And so it's a sort of legendarily bad game. But what really kind of puts it over the top is, of course, you know, the Mortal Kombat games were famous for digitizing the actors for the characters, at least at that era of the game. And so they actually filmed full motion video segments in between levels of the Mortal Kombat characters. So they have actors playing Sub-Zero, they have actors playing Scorpion, but then also like Quan Chi is, I think, maybe the most infamously bad. Like, Quan Chi's just a bad character.
Yeah. Well, so I played the N64 version, which did not have the cutscenes.
Man, that's even worse.
Yeah. I went, after beating it, I went and watched the like cutscene movie, and it's, I'm glad that they're putting this in this game just so people can experience it.
Yeah. When we say full motion video cutscenes, like, this is, you got your local community theater to come and play these characters. So it's all very ham-fisted, over-the-top acting and everything. There's a great deal of charm to me for those cutscenes.
Oh, yeah.
The game, much less so. I'm kind of impressed that you beat the game because
we definitely used the it's not infinite lives, but it's like 1,000 lives.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if getting through that without that would be impressive, but that is not an easy game.
So that will be included. They are also including Special Forces, Mortal Kombat Special Forces. That is, you play as Jax, I believe, in that game. And that is also a pretty bad game, not nearly as famous for being bad, but also a very bad game. And then the really weird thing is they're including Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3 WaveNet Edition. So this was Midway developed a system that would be able to connect to the internet in arcades. And so it was, you were going to be able to play people over long distance and everything. This is before internet play was, super common on consoles or anything. So you were going to be able to, do tournaments and different things like long distance using this specific system. They developed a special version of Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3, and it's the only arcade version that had Noob Saibot as a playable character in it. So that's why it's known at all. I think probably playing this on a home console now, that will be the only distinguishing feature, is that it has him as a playable character. But it's kind of neat, right? Because that's almost like lost media at this point.
Absolutely.
It's not a version that somebody can easily rip the ROM from or something. So that's kind of neat to see that they're including that as part of it. Let's see. The Attorney General of Louisiana has sued Roblox. That's in addition to, I guess they were kind of leading this charge, but also families, one in Denver, one in North Carolina, have all sued Roblox as well. This is all basically saying that they're not doing enough to protect children from potential sexual predators, I think is the big reason for this. Not in direct response to this, but at the same time that these lawsuits are getting filed, Roblox has rolled out new AI to potentially detect early warning signs of children being propositioned or groomed within the game. I feel like we've talked about Roblox before and these sorts of concerns that a lot of people, particularly parents, have about this game, because this is a game specifically targeted towards children for the most part. I don't know any adults who play Roblox.
Outside of people who will stream it, but that's about it. And they're playing very specific things in Roblox, but otherwise, no, I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. So for people who don't know anything about Roblox is, I guess, kind of similar to Minecraft in that you can build things, but specifically you can build entire games within it. And then you can sell things within those games. So it's a way to potentially generate income and everything. But as part of that, right, you can do chat and different things. So this has particularly attracted a lot of kids. It's playable on cell phones and, lots of different platforms. And because it attracts kids, just like with anything, right, it also attracts people looking to prey on children. So this is not an entirely Roblox problem, but the criticism from a lot of people is that they have not done enough to protect children.
Yeah, I think that's It might not be specifically their problem, but it is their responsibility to, do as much as possible to, limit it.
The company behind Roblox at this point is valued at multi-billion dollars, basically based entirely off of Roblox. So I think part of this is people saying, well, how much of that money that you're making are you rolling back in order to protect children? Right. It's one thing to say, hey, well, we will take action once something has been reported to us. But it's another thing to say, how much prevention are you trying to do?
Sure, yeah.
I guess in fairness to Roblox, this is the sort of thing you cannot ever entirely prevent against.
Yeah, and that's why I use the word limit, right? Like, I'd love to say eradicate, but like that's also an impossible goal for anybody to set. But you can definitely establish prevention methods and protective measures for those kids that are using your software.
I think in the past on this podcast, we've talked about at one point they were talking about rolling out a dating app within this game so that Roblox would be a dating platform. And we were like, this is played by like 12-year-olds. Like, you don't need dating in this. And plus you're just kind of introducing that whole idea of sexuality into this game, right? Like, not that 12-year-olds are, oblivious to sexuality, but like you're bringing up the discussion.
Yeah. Where are you're forcing it down our throats people with the dating sim in Roblox?
Well, it's not a dating sim. It was a dating app.
Not dating sim.
Right? Like, it was a way to date people, and the way, like, Tinder is or something. Yeah. Like, I mean, yes, like, just the insanity of that, right? Yeah. Like, if I had software that I knew was primarily being engaged with by children, the whole idea that I would think, well, let's turn it into a dating app.
Yeah, it's weird. Weird, I think, is the best word I can use.
Yeah, I mean, so I feel like Roblox has brought some of this onto themselves.
Oh, sure.
And, I don't want to see it shut down, but it's also hard to feel entirely sympathetic to them. I feel like if you are targeting children as a market, you have to, certainly go above and beyond when it comes to protecting them. And they have certainly not done that super well, it sounds like. 7 people were arrested at Microsoft after they occupied the office of Microsoft's president. This was in protest of Microsoft working with the Israeli Defense Force via their Azure network. This is their cloud network. But my understanding is that Israel has been using this in their war with the Palestinians over Gaza, and there's been a great deal of pushback and protesting, even among the employees at Microsoft, to say, hey, we need to pull them off of this. Like, they're using this tool, which is a commercial tool, right, that anybody can buy and use, but they're using this to what many people have called genocide.
Yeah.
And we as a company should not be involved in this in the same way that we as a company should not be involved in, making weapons of war.
Yeah. Well, it's one of those things that it's I don't, in some way, like, obviously not the same as the Roblox thing, but it's like as a company, I think it is, somewhat your responsibility to consider your impact in the world, and like who is using this and how are they using it. And
right.
I think Microsoft has, the responsibility to, have those considerations for sure.
Like this on its own is maybe not super related to this podcast, but there have been calls from people within the industry to boycott Xbox in response to this greater story about Microsoft, right? We should say this has nothing necessarily to do with the Xbox division of Microsoft, but, people are looking at it saying, hey, well, how can we poke at this company?
Looking at Microsoft broadly.
Right.
Yeah.
And, one of the very consumer-facing sections of Microsoft, right, is certainly the Xbox division.
Yep.
And So I think this is interesting. You know, I always think about stuff like this when people say, you know, get politics out of my video games. And it's like, you know, whether you like it or not, your video games are very political.
Yeah. Even
just buying your video games is a political act.
That is not something that you will be able to do ever.
Yeah. So, you know, at least bring that to the awareness of our audience that is going on. Let's see. One last, I kind of backloaded the political stuff here at the end of the podcast. I guess maybe we could have cut it if we ran out of time, but, one last detail here. Multiple countries are suspending, mail and package shipments to the United States, including Japan, most of Europe, have announced this. This is due to the suspension of the de minimis exception for items worth $800 or less. So my understanding of the situation is that the Trump administration has removed this exemption, which exempted mail items from having to pass through customs, or particularly packages, if the value of the items within it were $800 or less. So this exempted it from import tariffs and you know, and the delays in custom and the cost associated with that. This is different than, say, buying a PlayStation 5, because that comes in on freight pallets, right? And so that always has gone through customs and everything. That's when you see, you know, the big shipyards in, you know, San Diego and places like that on the coast, where those are brought in and those, you know, automatically go through that system and everything. This is more thinking of a letter that you might send, a package that you might send. And where this affects us in video games, right, is, well, one, you might have a friend who lives overseas who wants to send you a copy of something. But even a lot of small retailers that you might be, you know, let's say on eBay, buying something from somebody. You want to buy an old Japanese Famicom, right, and import that. That's going to be less than $800. So it normally would not go through the same system, but now all of a sudden it would have to. And in response, these countries have said, hey, we're just suspending this mail delivery entirely.
Yeah. No, I am, as somebody that has bought games from Japan through eBay. Yeah. Like that, it's just another one of those things that makes you so frustrated with how our current administration has handled things and is going to continue to handle things. Again, and I fully recognize this is very first world problems, especially compared to the last story we just talked about. Yeah. But it is still, an annoyance this is what has been considered. This is the impact of what, you know, policy decisions have been made.
Yeah. And I mean, again, it's that whole question of how do politics affect the game industry?
Yep.
Right. And this is I feel like a very clear cut way. It's not going to necessarily affect everyone, but, you know, similar, I've imported games in the past. You know, you start looking at this is the way, places like, Shein and, Alibaba and those sorts of places have been able to ship in like, gaming related items. So for example, those like sort of, Chinese handheld systems that, you know, are emulators. I've talked on here before that, like, I've bought some of those, you know, you can buy one of those for $50, right? So this will affect those. That was part of the reason they were able to import those at a very cheap rate. And so, you know, this is going to affect the game industry. Maybe not everyone within the game industry, maybe not every aspect of the game industry, but it will affect the game industry.
Certainly.
And maybe more broadly, the gaming culture might be a way to talk about the effect.
Sure. Yes, absolutely.
You know, Alicia's not going to be able to import her stuffed Blastoid or whatever she wants. There are like 6 Pokemon I know, so like I just choose among those 6 Pokemon. Like, and I don't want to say Alicia's importing a Mr. Mime. That feels like something creepy to say about her. All right, that does it for news. So let's move on to our big question. And because of who is here this week, and it's just the two of us.
It's guy talk.
Yeah, it's guy talk. Let's talk about wrestling. So, Mario, our big question is, what is your ideal wrestling game? So there have been lots and lots of wrestling games over the years. So this question is really kind of asking, looking at what's been out there in the past, not necessarily picking one of those games, but like, how would you build the perfect wrestling game for you?
So I think it would go one of two ways.
As a very big wrestling fan, we should note.
It would go one of two ways. One style of wrestling game that I would love to see, and they've done in the past, I think you've even talked about it on the show, would be some sort of like turn-based RPG. I know they did the WrestleQuest game. I think you weren't the biggest fan of that game.
That's a bad game.
I have it. I have not played it. But something like that, something RPG. I guess it doesn't have to be turn-based. You could have an action RPG, but I feel like that starts to get a little messier. So some sort of like solid turn-based RPG with a good story. But I think one of the things that is also important, and this is what I've always heard, one of the things that I believe it was No Mercy on the N64 did really well was their story mode. And the reason that it was so good was it had branching paths based on if you won or lost a match.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the things within wrestling that's so interesting is when you think about it from as a performance, especially like the storylines that happen, losing a match impacts the story as much as winning a match does, right? Like when you think about the trajectory that puts a character on. And so I think it's so great that No Mercy, it put you in the match, and if you won that match, you went down one path, and if you lost the match, it went down another path. And I think that's not something that a lot of story modes do. It's oftentimes if you win the fight, you have to win, right? Like if you lose, you game over, and then you have to try again from your previous save. And so the fact that it had this more complex storyline, I love that. I think that's so awesome. And so I would love to see that incorporated into a wrestling game as well. Something that embraced something that took the like behind the scenes of the like storylines and the crafting of it, I think is something I would also want to see.
Yeah, and like the 2K basketball games have included story modes. And those story modes are really wild, sometimes really weird. Like there's one that involves Ghost. And I feel like, with the NBA, there is a story that goes on through the NBA season, but that story sort of entirely evolves out of what's going on in the games, right? So like this past season, we had sort of the, the sort of elevation of the Oklahoma City Thunder, right?
Yep.
To being like a bunch of young guys who were like, no, we are sort of declaring ourselves here.
Yeah, almost expected to be like the new
dynasty.
They might be the new dynasty with how young they are and, continued success. Absolutely.
And so like that generally, or you have somebody, the big dumper in Seattle in baseball this year.
Cal Raleigh.
Yeah. And, here you have a catcher who hasn't come completely out of nowhere, but was not on most people's radar, even with his season last year. And he hits 50 home runs. First catcher ever, right, to reach this point.
There's still a month of the season left, right? Like it's going to shatter that record.
Right. He's like, I think on pace for 62 home runs still at this point, which would, be an amazing achievement. And so you look at something like that, and like these narratives sort of grow out of the game itself.
Yep.
Right. Wrestling, the narrative is sort of predates the actual action in the ring. Right. Like that's why you show up to wrestling for a lot of people. Right. I would say the vast majority of fans are there for the storyline more than the actual wrestling to some degree.
Yep.
That's the reason Hulk Hogan can have a career as long as he did, even though he's a god awful wrestler in a lot of ways. And so, I feel like that story, having a cool story and telling that story and having that story be sort of centered at what you're doing matters more than it does in other sports games.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's, so we were talking about this before the start, as we usually do. And I thought one of the best points that you had made was talking about how the wrestling games, at least the current WWE 2K games, are similar to, they're treated like a sports game. And I don't necessarily have a problem with that. I get that, and I understand why they do it. And I think that there's a place for that. But I also think that professional wrestling has that additional layer to offer in the ways that there is this dynamic behind the scenes, activity that's happening as well. And so, I know that some of the recent games have this like where you essentially play the booker, where like you're creating so I'm going to make I'm creating a pay-per-view. So I'm going to have this person go up against this person. And I think that that's really cool as well. And I think if you could blend those two modes together, that would be of interest.
So I'll jump in here and say that one of the directions I would love to see a wrestling game take is to really embrace that even further. I feel like the thing that most wrestling games never get, I don't feel like any wrestling game has ever gotten really close to this. I will say some of the WWE games have tried with their sort of historical modes to okay, you have to do this move and then you have to lose this match, right? And this is the way you need to lose it, or this is how you need to pin this guy. And some of that's getting at what I would like to see, but part of what makes a good match in wrestling isn't so much necessarily who wins or loses, but it is very much about the sort of drama during the match, right? And when you treat wrestling as a sport, then my inclination is, in the way that I play a football or a basketball game, I want to dominate the opponent, right? And so a lot of wrestling matches that when I play a video game, there's no drama in them. There's no back and forth, and they've tried to do some rubber band AI and different things to account for that. But I think it would be sort of interesting that, hey, your assignment is not just to go out and necessarily win this match, but to make this a compelling match for the audience to watch.
So I was thinking about this before the podcast, and it's going to be a weird example, but I also think it's a very good example, is the wrestling chapter from Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. Okay. Where have you played that game? So in that game, there's one segment of it where you are essentially in a wrestling fighting promotion, and you can't just win the fight, the turn-based battle. The promoter of the promotion says you have to do these 3 things in order to win. You've got to use a special move, or you've got to do 3 style moves, or you can't use your hammer at all.
And the WWE games have done something similar with that. But go ahead.
Oh, but I was going to say, I think something like that, where you have these restrictions, it gets at some of that narrative within the narrative, right? That, yes, you've got the storyline between 2 wrestling characters, that's overarching over a long period of time. But there's also the story and the psychology within like an individual match as well. Of I'm going after this guy's legs because he's a high flyer, and I'm gonna make sure to like take that part of his, you know, fighting style away from him, or, you know, we're really working the arms, and so to, you know, go for the submission. And like I said, some of the games have kind of done that with like the individual like body fatigue meters and stuff, but I think there are ways to complexify that I think would be very cool. So I love that idea that you're talking about.
Yeah, I think you kind of touched on this a little earlier when you were talking about, you know, the performance studies look at a concert, right? And so this almost becomes like, well, it's almost an acting game at some point, right? Like, because really wrestling is more theater than sport in a lot of ways.
Sure.
You know, it is theater, maybe more like a Cirque du Soleil show.
Yeah.
Is theater, right? It's very athletic. It's very, you know, impressive to watch. But like at the end of the day, they're doing theater up there.
Yeah, I was actually just as I'm preparing for my prelims, I'm doing some reading, and I think one of the things that this reading kind of gets at that I think the wrestling games do. The wrestling games focus on wrestling as a competition, and that's the way that it's presented. But in actuality, it's much more of a collaboration.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And I don't know how you necessarily gamify that, but I think if it can get at that collaborative aspect between two wrestlers in the ways that they're telling a story, I think that would be very cool.
Yeah, and for people who don't know, like when two guys are in the ring or two women are in the ring wrestling each other, you know, that is, those two individuals are working together. Like they are telling each other, you know, when you see them like lock up, they're often talking to each other in those moments going, hey, I'm going to do this move next, right? And then you do this. Like it's not even, sometimes the matches are planned out in advance, but often they're kind of calling their shots as it goes.
Especially the more established, you know, more veteran wrestlers there. Usually the more veteran of the two is kind of calling the match, and they're doing a lot of improvising like right then and there.
Right. And the referee might be giving them some information as well during that. And yeah, that's not, that collaborative nature, right, is kind of lost in wrestling games. And so a lot of the drama, right, like a lot of wrestling games become, oh, like I've learned these 10 moves and I can just do these 10 moves over and over again. And, you know, sometimes they'll build in incentives to vary up your move set within the game. But, you know, like often once I figured out how to beat an opponent, there's nothing really more to the game.
If I can just do one move over and over again and that's going to win,
Right.
If the point is to win, why would I not just do that? Aside from the fact of like, as a fan, I'm trying to give myself this additional thing to do. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I've thought that for a long time with wrestling games, because I feel like that wrestling games often will lose the thing that I like about wrestling.
Yeah.
And not that I always think the stories are good, but I think the story within a match is often very good. Even if I don't care about the grander story, it's why I can not watch wrestling week to week and tune into something like SummerSlam and really enjoy a match, because there's a really cool story within that match. And that often gets lost in that process of translation to video game.
Yep.
I think you said you had another idea.
Oh, no, not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
I think if I was thinking about the, I've already forgotten what I was talking about. Oh, just like the story aspects, or like the turn-based and the story aspects.
Right,
I think I was
RPG.
thinking about those as separate, but I think that those could be very overlapped with one another.
Well, I think RPG is like one way to approach that, thinking of more story-driven, even with a more traditional wrestling game.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think the thing, again, we kind of touched on this before we start recording, but, you know, those 64-bit wrestling games on the N64 were very much sort of party games.
Yes.
And they were the sort of games that, I remember in college playing with friends, and you would have somebody come over who really wasn't into wrestling, but they could sit down and you could say, okay, you do these 3 things and you can do different moves. Almost like, getting somebody to play Smash Brothers, right? Like it's not super hard. You won't know the nuance, but you'll be able to sit down and have some fun with it. And then you had this wide variety of goofy characters to pick from and everything. And maybe they knew a handful of them, but, most of them they didn't. So, I think I made a joke to you about they see Undertaker and they're like, this guy looks interesting. And you're like, yeah, he is. You should definitely pick the guy who looks like he's undead or Kane, of that era. Or Crow Sting.
I was going to say Mankind was a good one as well.
Yeah. And so people would pick those characters and then they would join in and, here's a chair I can pick up and I can go hit you. And it's really easy because there's one button to pick up this chair and walk over and hit somebody. I understand wrestling's not super complicated with the rules. I understand what's going on. And I feel like most wrestling games have gotten, this kind of gets to your point. They've gotten more like real sports games. And in that they've gotten pretty complicated.
Yeah. I have not played one of the new WWE games or really any wrestling game that's been recently released. The newest one I probably played was like one from the original Xbox. So I haven't played those in quite a while, despite how big of a fan I am. But I can see, I just feels like that's how so many other games have gone with like your Maddens and your NBAs in terms of they've raised the skill floor. Right. Like it's one thing to raise the skill ceiling, but they've raised that floor as well. And that makes it just harder to engage with.
Right.
Especially on like hey, I'm going to bring this to the party I'm going to, or a group of friends are getting together. This person doesn't know anything about wrestling or has never played one before, so they don't really get to engage with it.
Yeah. And, I think about sports games. Madden is not a game I could bring somebody who maybe is an NFL fan and just set them down and say, let's play a quick game.
Yeah.
Like it would be overwhelming.
Yep.
Whereas something like NFL Blitz or Madden on a 16-bit system was simple enough for anyone to pick up and play.
Tecmo Bowl, right? It's like there's not much to that, and that's a good thing. Yeah,
and I feel like wrestling games have gone that direction. And so it means when we do an event like Playing for Pets or, I get together with a group of friends, wrestling games are not the games I break out for people to play. Not that I particularly play a lot of wrestling games, but I have played, I don't know, whatever WWE game from 2 or 3 years ago. And I did play that AEW Fight Forever game. And I would not break out either of those, even though AEW is very much going for that sort of 64-bit era of games and the style of it. So, what was the title of that? WWE All-Stars, I think was the title. They made a more kind of arcadey game.
I think they had their own playgrounds as well.
Yeah.
Similar to the NBA.
Yeah, but like that one during the 360 era, I think it was All Stars, was very sort of pick up and play.
Gotcha.
The characters were a little exaggerated. They kind of looked almost like action figures. And, it had sort of some modern wrestlers, but a lot of those classic ones like Andre the Giant, Hulk Hogan that people would be familiar with. And I feel like that's maybe the last like really accessible wrestling game they made. And I kind of wish they would go back and make something like that, sort of an NBA Jam or NFL Blitz style wrestling game, very arcadey, where anybody can kind of pick it up and play.
Yeah.
And then you can mix in those different game modes, right? Like put a steel cage in there, put in a ladder match or something, because it's much more of a party game. People aren't taking it that serious.
Yeah.
The closest thing to that is, and I think the game that does that the best in recent years is Gang Beast.
Oh, sure.
And Gang Beast has specifically that one level where you're in a wrestling ring and you're trying to throw the other
over the top rope. Yeah.
And really something like that, maybe not with that goofy control scheme,
Sure.
but something of that nature I could see being really engaging, particularly if you brought in those very recognizable characters. Your John Cena, your Rock, your your Jake the Snake, those like sort of characters that people would be able to clearly identify quick and easy.
Absolutely.
So that's the other direction I could see going with it.
And I think there's definitely a place for that. I think, while I say this is the thing that I want, if they released that style of game, I would be almost equally as excited, So, I think I'd love to see. I think both of those could exist at the same time.
Well, I think that's maybe what is needed. More diversity of games.
Yep.
Like instead of thinking the wrestling license has to be one thing. And I know we've talked about it before with sports games, right? The sort of frustration of why is Madden the only football game that we get anymore?
Yeah.
Like even something like it feels like they could make a new NFL Blitz every few years.
Yep.
Maybe not a yearly franchise, but every few years put a new one of those out. And there would be an audience for it.
Yeah.
NBA Jam, same way. They did put out those backyard baseball games.
The old school ones. Yeah. 97.
Yeah. They re-released those not too long ago. So, I mean, at least some people think there's a market for it. I don't know how well those sold and everything. But anyways, that does it for our big question. So that does it for this episode. Thank you, Mario, for joining me. Yep. Thank you to everyone listening. As always, you can check out past episodes and other content by going to salukigames.com. We appreciate a positive rating on whatever outlet you're listening to, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. You can also listen to these podcasts on YouTube. We upload all of them onto there. And we're always happy to receive your comments and questions. You can send those by emailing justin.young@siu.edu. And we read some of those on the podcast. So that's always fun to do as well. Until then, however, we will be back next week with another episode. Play something fun, maybe like pine over wrestling games, figure out what the best wrestling game is. Send us in your thoughts on what would make a great wrestling game. We'd love to hear those, but play something fun and we will hear from you next week.